It's here and now.
Venezuelan officials who remain close to embattled President Nicolas Maduro. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports new sanctions and other actions are meant to force Maduro from power.
The Treasury Department is adding 6 Venezuelan security officials to a sanctions list, accusing them of helping Maduro block U.S. aid to the country. U.S. envoy Elliot Abrams says the State Department is also revoking dozens of visas.
Maduro supporters that abuse or violate human rights, steal from the Venezuelan people, or undermine Venezuela's democracy are not welcome in the United States. Neither are their family members.
He wouldn't say exactly how many Venezuelans are losing U.S. visas or name names. Abrams calls this an ongoing process, adding that the U.S. will continue to take appropriate actions against Maduro associates. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
At least 25 Afghan soldiers have been killed defending a military base in Afghanistan's Helmand province. The Interior Ministry says 20 terrorists also died in the attack this morning. From Islamabad, NPR's Abdul Sattar has more.
Taliban spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid told NPR around 100 foreign and Afghan soldiers were killed in the attack. But Deborah Richardson, a Resolute support spokesperson, asserts no American or coalition troops were killed or wounded in the attack. It comes a day after U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan Reconciliation Zalmi Khalilzad described this week's Doha talks as productive. Abdul Sattar, NPR News, Islamabad.
There are calls in Israel for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to step down following a dramatic announcement on Thursday by the Attorney General that he is likely to indict the Prime Minister in the coming months on charges of corruption. But as NPR's Daniel Estrin reports from Jerusalem, Netanyahu is vowing to remain in power.
Netanyahu's main political rival, a former army chief, says Netanyahu cannot effectively govern now. He says if Netanyahu wins re-election in April, he will not join his governing coalition. That would narrow Netanyahu's chances of building a stable coalition. Yochanan Plesner of the nonpartisan Israel Democracy Institute says Netanyahu should step aside.
From a moral and ethical standpoint, it's a very undesired outcome that a prime minister continues to serve under such severe charges.
Senator Elizabeth Warren, running to be the Democratic nominee for president, denounced Netanyahu. President Trump praised him. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, Jerusalem.
The last check, the Dow up 67 points. This is NPR.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Jack Kent Cook Foundation, providing scholarships throughout the nation to exceptionally high-achieving students with financial need from middle school to college. Application for 7th grade students is open. More at jkcf.org.
You're listening to WHYY at 104. Skies are cloudy, and the temperature is cold for the first day of March, 34 degrees. We should be closer to 50 today. Good afternoon. I'm Mary Cummings, Jordan, WHYY News. Federal prosecutors say the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office went too easy on a gunman who pleaded guilty to shooting and nearly killing a store owner. U.S. Attorney William McSwain announced the federal indictment of Javon Patterson on Thursday. In a plea deal with city prosecutors, Patterson was sentenced to a minimum of 3.5 years in prison for shooting the store owner during an attempted robbery. The victim was shot in the groin and had to sell his store. McSwain says the office of DA Larry Krasner, quote, offers sweetheart deals to violent defendants, and he blames Krasner's policy for an uptick in homicides. Krasner says he welcomes the federal prosecution of Patterson, but rejects blame for for the increase in homicides. Delaware has been working to get more naloxone into the hands of all first responders in the state. Now, health workers will distribute the opioid overdose reversing drug directly to the public for the first time at tomorrow's Attack Addiction 5K in Newcastle. Angie Clem of Newark will be there, walking in honor of her daughter Paige, who died of an overdose last April.
I hate when people say, oh, it's a choice. Well, yeah, in the beginning it is choice. But then the choice turns into an addiction. Then the addiction is a disease. It's just like alcohol.
Last year, Delaware first responders administered 3,700 doses of naloxone to overdose victims, a 30% increase from 2017. Despite those life-saving efforts, the state says more than 400 residents died from overdoses in 2018. Checking sports, it's Flyers Devils in Newark, New Jersey tonight at 7. Phillies meet the Pirates in grapefruit play at 1 today. Union open their regular season tomorrow against Toronto FC at home, and the Sixers take on Golden State tomorrow night. Forecast for today, mostly cloudy. We could see some rain or snow showers later on today, with highs in the upper 30s. Rain overnight, lows dipping to the mid-30s, and cloudy tomorrow and up to about 42. This is WHYY.
From NPR and WBUR, I'm Eric Westervelt.
I'm Peter O'Dowd. This is Here and Now. A massive winter storm will stretch across the country this weekend from California all the way to the Northeast. And that means more rain for California, where some towns are already flooded. The Russian River in the northern part of the state swelled to the highest level in 25 years late Wednesday. It turned the town of Guerneville into an island. A nearby weather station measured over 20 inches of rainfall in 2 days. Joining us now is Linda Hopkins, who is a supervisor for Sonoma County. Linda, thanks for joining us.
Of course.
I know you were up in the air recently surveying the damage. What did you see?
It is just so widespread. I mean, we have entire small towns along the Russian River underwater, businesses, homes, parking lots, infrastructure. We also have a number of downed trees and power lines and significant mudslides that are blocking off main arterials throughout Sonoma County.
We keep reading that several towns in the area have been turned into islands. What does that mean? Does that mean that the roads are completely impassable in some places?
Yes, so exactly. The roads are actually submerged and the community literally has no way in and no way out. So they either have to evacuate before the roads go under, or they are sitting there hunkered down for sometimes days on end, often without power, and just left with whatever food supplies they have on hand when the roads close.
How are those people doing? Have they needed to be rescued from the waters?
We have had about 60 rescues of people, in addition to a number of pet and livestock rescues. We're very lucky that we had the National Guard here. We also had local firefighters working with state officials. We had 3 swiftwater teams and 4 helicopters on duty, able to rescue people who were trapped.
Look, the Russian River Valley, it's prone to flooding. We're seeing there was major floods in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 80s and in the 90s and of course now. But you've gotten nearly 2 feet of rain in 2 days. How does that compare to what you've seen in the past?
This is definitely a generational weather event and a generational flood. You know, unfortunately, we've got a lot of people who have moved to the Russian River area since the 90s, and we haven't really had a flood this bad, as you said, in 25 years. And so for some people, this is really a wake-up call of exactly how dangerous and how large the Russian River can get.
How's your home? Do you live in the area?
I do. Unfortunately, my home is on a hill, but I was isolated. I had all of the main arterials cut off around me, and some neighbors just literally down the hill from me were flooded out entirely.
You've had so many issues in Sonoma County recently. There was the wildfires in 2017, tons of precipitation this year. How are people holding up through all of these natural disasters?
You know, I really do believe that strong communities become stronger in the event of a disaster, and Sonoma County pulls together, and I know that we will pull together to get through this flood. But, you know, it really raises another point, which is that in many ways we now feel like we are ground zero for the impacts of climate change. Climate change modeling and predictions show that we will actually have more severe fire seasons, but then also in the winter more severe flooding seasons. So we sort of feel like now we have 2 seasons in Sonoma County where it's either fire or flood season.
You're a politician, and you can help craft some of the policies that might mitigate that. Is that what you're doing? Are you prepared?
Absolutely. You know, we've really focused on resilience and recovery, and we actually set up an entire office of recovery and resiliency after the fires that I think will come in very handy for the flooding that we're currently experiencing. But in addition to looking at how we can, for instance, elevate homes and businesses more effectively to get them out of the floodplain or reduce fire risk through home hardening and other strategies, we're also trying to look at how do we reduce our own greenhouse gas emissions here at home so that we make sure that Sonoma County isn't contributing to the international challenge of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions.
Are the waters receding now?
The waters are receding, and this morning we will be sending 60 county employees in to do property damage assessments. We're hoping that residents will be back in and allowed into the evacuated areas this afternoon.
Linda Hopkins is a supervisor for Sonoma County, California, where floodwaters from the Russian River now do appear to be receding. Linda, thank you and good luck.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Well, the New England Patriots billionaire owner Robert Kraft pleaded not guilty this week to charges of soliciting prostitution. The charges stem from an ongoing human trafficking investigation in several South Florida counties. The United Nations reports that sexual exploitation remains the most widespread form of human trafficking around the world. We wanted to take a deeper look at trafficking related to massage parlors in the U.S. Joining us now is Meredith Dank, an expert on human trafficking at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. Meredith, welcome to Here and Now.
Thank you for having me.
There's still a lot we don't really know about this case with Robert Kraft and the wider trafficking investigation surrounding it, but when you first heard about the story, what were your thoughts?
My thoughts immediately went to the women who were involved in the massage parlor and what was happening to them. Were they arrested? And my understanding is they weren't, but in that case, were they receiving any kind of services or immigration relief?
What do we know about who's working in these parlors? I mean, some of the women might be immigrants and possibly have sketchy legal statuses, but from your research, what do we know about how women are recruited for these?
So the recruitment, I think, can happen in many different ways. Sometimes in their home country, oftentimes it's China or Korea or Thailand. They might be approached about a work opportunity. In some cases, people are very open about the fact that they might be working in a massage parlor and they can make the choice as to whether or not they want to do that. In other cases, they're told they would work in a restaurant or a nail salon, and then they come here. And there are definitely cases where women are then forced or coerced into working in a massage parlor. But what I often hear is that they're paying a snakehead, sometimes upwards of tens of thousands of dollars, and they have to pay that. Yes, and they have to pay that debt back. And so they come here, they might start working in a restaurant or a nail salon, not make much money, and as a result they have to look for other ways in which they can do that and fly under the radar, especially if they're not on a legal visa.
Well, we know that these illicit massage businesses have existed in the U.S. for a long time, and they're often fronts for prostitution. But how much do we really know about these parlors and how they operate, the whole thing?
We don't know much. There hasn't been a ton of research that's been done to date. I've done a little bit of research in interviewing law enforcement about what they've been seeing, particularly trends over time. And there definitely has been a proliferation of these massage parlors, particularly in the Midwest and in the South. However, the actual operation of the massage parlors is still very much a big question. You know, who is operating them? Is there a larger organization behind it, or is it tend to be just mom and pop type of massage parlors where somebody opens it up, they might have networks with other massage parlors across the country, but there isn't one single person behind it.
And so we don't know a lot about the larger potential global trafficking chain behind that as well.
Correct.
And is that because there's reluctance to talk, that researchers are having trouble getting access, or what?
I think that is definitely a big piece, is, you know, who would we speak to other than law enforcement, which can provide, I think, one point of view. But it's really important to be able to understand the true dynamics of these parlors and the operation is to be able to talk to the people working inside of them, which is where I think we would really begin to understand whether or not there's actual sex trafficking happening. I think that's something law enforcement has really struggled with finding evidence for. In the case of the Robert Kraft situation, some of the details I saw, it kind of was more about labor trafficking, the fact that they were living in the place that they were working, that the living conditions were pretty subpar. These are all signs of actual labor trafficking, not necessarily sex trafficking. So I think there's still a lot we need to learn to even begin to get the nuance of this problem.
I want to get your response to some tape from the Martin County, Florida Sheriff's Office that opened this investigation. Sheriff William Snyder spoke earlier this week with our colleagues at All Things Considered. He said, one of the reasons sex trafficking continues today is because many of the women working in these businesses just don't want to cooperate with law enforcement.
Invariably, our methodology has been, up until we did this here, we'll send a couple of undercover detectives in, they'll be solicited for sex, we'll arrest the workers and shut the place down, and the problem goes away, but not really goes away. And so when this came in, I made the decision that we would treat this differently, and that we would go after the traffickers and the men, the end users.
Meredith, what do you think about the sheriff's strategy of going after the Johns and potentially the larger traffickers?
Well, first of all, I think we need to determine whether or not there's actual sex trafficking happening here, or if it's exploitation, gender-based violence, that sort of thing. But let's say there is a trafficker behind that. I think that is a good strategy, is to try and determine who that might be. In some cases, the massage parlor, the person that you would get access to is the middle manager, not necessarily the person who owns it, or the person who's operating it. So I think it's important that we really begin to understand, again, the structure of how a massage parlor works. And then as far as the Johns go and targeting them, I think there's a lot of issues that can come up if you're just solely focusing on the demand side of things. It doesn't necessarily get rid of the issue that these women are coming in here and looking for ways in order to pay that debt back, and there are very few options available to them. That doesn't mean that working in a massage parlor should be the only option, but I think we really need to be creative and think about how we can help these women in order to provide opportunities for women who don't want to be doing this and are constrained in the choices available to them to be able to pay back this debt or pay for whatever other kind of debt that they might have, is really, I think, the angle we should be taking.
Meredith Dank is an expert on human trafficking and a research professor at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. Meredith, thanks so much.
Thank you.
You're listening to Here and Now.
Allegations that Michael Jackson sexually abused young boys have been around for years. A new documentary dives into the stories of two accusers and their families.
They were dazzled, they were starstruck. They let their little boys sleep in Jackson's bed night after night and didn't think twice about that.
We hear from the director of the new documentary this afternoon on All Things Considered.
Join us for All Things Considered beginning at 4 today on WHYY.
I'm Susan Levy. The parents of an American college student who died after being detained in North Korea say Kim Jong-un and his evil regime are responsible for his death. Fred and Cindy Warmbier rebuked President Trump in a statement today. Trump said he takes Kim at his word that Kim was unaware of alleged mistreatment of Autumn Warmbier. President Trump claims that his former lawyer Michael Cohen shopped a book to publishers that portrayed Trump in a favorable light. Trump said Cohen's manuscript was a love letter and that Congress should demand the manuscript as evidence. Cohen's congressional testimony this week was fraudulent and dishonest. India's prime minister says a tough response by his country's armed forces to recent attacks in Indian-controlled Kashmir have curtailed the influence of terror groups in his country. Prime Minister Narendra Modi pledged to curtail acts of terrorism further. You're listening to Here and Now.
This is WHYY at 119. A travel note for you in Upper Marion Township. 202 northbound is closed between Town Center Road and Henderson Road because of an accident. Ahead in about 15 minutes, we'll hear about a smartphone app which can help people in rehab avoid relapse. Peter O'Dowd will have details. That story's coming up in just a bit on 90.9 FM, WHYY, your NPR member station.
Supporting WHYY, PA Post. Post, Pennsylvania's nonprofit news collaboration, including WHYY, offering State of the State, a weekly podcast offering in-depth discussions about relevant news. More at papost.org. And Lourdes Cardiology is nationally recognized as a 5-star heart care provider multiple times across multiple subspecialties by Health Grades. It's just one way they are Cardi accomplished. Lourdes Cardiology, the Heart Hospital, lourdescardiology.net.
Funding for Here and Now comes from WBUR Boston and your NPR station. And from Constant Contact. Their automation features let customers automatically send welcome and birthday emails, as well as autoresponders when users take an action. Learn more at ConstantContact.com.
It's Here and Now. YouTube said yesterday that it's disabling comments on most videos featuring children, after a video blogger recently showed how alleged pedophiles have been taking advantage of the comment section to post sexually explicit messages. It's just one of the social media stories we're following this week with Femi Oke, host of The Stream on Al Jazeera English. So let's bring her in. Femi, hi.
Hello there, Peter. Hi.
Good. So, YouTube says you can't comment on videos with kids any longer, younger than 13. It seems like a huge task to undertake because users upload 400 hours of content a minute on YouTube. So how do you do it? How do you know if a kid even meets that threshold?
Well, there are a couple of things YouTube is doing, and they announced this on Thursday, that they describe this as critical steps to keep young people safe on YouTube. So the disabling of the content of the video comments. Any video that has minors in it, unless you have a special request, the comments will be disabled. Your special request has to go through to YouTube. They will look at it, and you have to moderate the comments. They can't just be there. You have to be there in the chat room and moderate them. They also have, to answer your question, Peter, about how do they do it, a comment classifier that is going to be even more aggressive than the ones that they're using right now, and that will be looking out for predatory comments, and they will be removing all material that the people feel and that YouTube feel is endangering children, and that's where they're enlisting our help. Any of the users on YouTube, anybody watching YouTube, if you see something, flag that content. So they need the help of people using YouTube as well as their own team.
Okay, and it sounds like a lot of people on social media are saying, thanks, YouTube, but why aren't you doing more about all the other problems on your site?